All right, let's start with our player comps. We're going to start with one guy that I think we brought up before because we both have him on our list and both come up with different players, but you can sort of see stylistically that we're in the same ballpark. Bijan Robinson, greatest running back prospect since whoever. We've each comped him to effectively a Hall of Famer. So who's the Hall of Famer that you think Bijan reminds you of?
I went with Edgerrin James, and now I went back and watched Edgerrin James tape, and James probably has a little more gear to him, a little more of a second gear, or doesn't have it now. But he went 4.38 coming out of Miami. But the rest is very similar in that they are elite change of direction dudes at 215, 216 pounds. That the way they run is just so smooth. The contact balance is all there, that there's so few weaknesses to their game. That's why obviously Edge was a Hall of Famer. I think that's a fair comp. I like yours as well, though, too.
Yeah, no, I think yours is good. Edge struck me as a little bit more kind of twitchy and sudden moving than Bijan and my guy. What the kind of the thing that ties him together with my comp, who was LaDainian Tomlinson, is those two guys just feel so incredible. Like, smoothness is the thing that connects them. Like, you watch those guys move and everything looks like it's one fluid movement. Even when there's like 4 or 5 cuts involved, it all feels like it's one pattern of movement, and they just kind of go from one smooth move to the next. And when you watch Tomlinson run, it's all like that. It's not these kind of sudden twitchy adjustments in where he's moving. It's just one smooth glide to the next, one smooth cut, one smooth jump. That's, I think, where he really reminds me of Bijan.
Yeah, and again, don't usually advocate for comping to Hall of Famers, right. But when you are when you're that caliber prospect, when you're talking about the way Bijan is, that's when you can talk about Hall of Fame comps, because those are the guys that when you're blue chip prospect, you're not going to comp them to your run-of-the-mill starter in the NFL right now.
Okay, you've got one that I think is really interesting. Will Levis. Now, this is particularly interesting because you and I think, are both higher on Levis than most other people. And yet, who's your comp for him?
My comp for him is Jake Locker, the Washington QB, former Washington QB, former Titans QB. And I think there's maybe a little revisionist history on Locker and who he was, thought of as a draft bust. But that was because he literally just stopped caring about football, right? Like, he retired after 4 years in the NFL because he didn't want to play anymore. And it's like well documented that he just gave up and was showing signs of life prior to that. But the arm, the size, Locker was 6'2", 230. The athleticism, Locker actually probably a little bit better, a little more of a high-end runner coming out. He ran a 4.58 with a 6'7", 7.3 cone. Like, he was a freak at his size. Levis probably not that, but you're just that aspect of his game. Like, he had that. It wasn't the focal point of his game. Both, tough dudes, both willing to take a hit. I think that's the comp that I keep going back to. That the biggest thing with Locker, the biggest thing with Levis is just their accuracy. It truly is. Like, with Levis, if you tell me that he improves his accuracy by, a significant notch at the next level, I'm telling you that he's going to be a franchise quarterback. Like, that is the thing standing in the way for him. So Locker never fixed it. Will Levis? I don't know.
It's not my comp, but I heard somebody comp Levis to Mitchell Trubisky, which I can see. Like,
No, I don't see that at all.
Really?
I don't like that comp. Trubisky was a mental midget, still is. Pressure came, he was pooing his pants, peeing down his leg, doing both at the same time sometimes. It just, Trubisky, and that's like the opposite. Like, Trubisky, not a tough dude whatsoever. He would run out of bounds before he stuck his shoulder into a defensive back. And that was like his biggest downfall too. So that's like the reason, I think, from a pure tools perspective, possibly. But is the real separator to me between those two.
You're right. The toughness part doesn't mesh with Trubisky, but the inconsistency, for a guy that has that physical skill set, like, why are you not making more big plays? That part, I think, meshes with Trubisky. Like, there's some elements to it, I think, that I can definitely see the argument for. Who's the next guy on this list? So you already mentioned Myles Murphy being a Rashawn Gary comp. I think that's a pretty good one. Another edge rusher. I struggled to get a comp for him. Tyree Wilson.
I went with Jason Pierre-Paul. And now we didn't get pre-draft testing on Tyree Wilson, but his sort of selling points on tape aren't something that I think is going to get captured in pre-draft testing. And probably that's why, he wasn't going to go out and do it, because it probably wasn't going to be elite. Jason Pierre-Paul coming out wasn't either. And he's never been a guy who wins with pure athleticism. But if you'll recall, he was the guy doing backflips at 270 pounds, was just so fluid. And he ran a 4.78 with a 9.7 broad jump and 30.5-inch vertical. That was Jason Pierre-Paul. Nothing special athletically, but he had such a big wingspan, 34 3/4-inch arms, just played with such easy leverage and play strength, and then could finish plays so well. He gets off blocks and then gets to ball carriers with such ease. And that to me is Tyree Wilson, that he just can play off a block and make a play that just he had no business getting to, because his wingspan is so long, because he is so just fluid athletically, that I think that gives you a high floor when you're projecting a guy like that to the next level.
Yeah, I really struggled to comp him because he has such this unusual body type that I was really struggling going back through the archives, through the database, trying to come up with edge rushers that just had anything like that as a body type. I couldn't really come up with a good one, certainly not one that played a similar kind of style. Let's talk with some wide receivers.
Yes.
My number one wide receiver in the draft is still Jordan Addison. JSN is your number one now, right?
Correct.
So who does JSN remind you of? And then I'll give you my Addison one.
This one is maybe one of the more accurate comps ever that I think I've ever done. And it's Julian Edelman. Purely this was like from an on-field perspective. I just thought, both kind of slots who didn't necessarily have to play the slot, both super sudden route runners, very difficult to stick with for an entire route tree if they're, making multiple breaks and whatnot. But then the pre-draft testing hit, and it was probably the closest pre-draft testing I've ever seen between two prospects. The biggest difference is that JSN's 2 inches taller. He was 2 inches taller, 1 pound heavier. They ran the exact same 40 time, 4.52. They ran 1/100th of a second off in their short shuttle, 3.92 for Edelman, 3.93 for Jackson Smith. 3-cone was 0.5 off, 6.62 for Edelman, 6.57 for Jack Smith and Jigba, 36.5-inch vert for Edelman versus 35-inch vert for Jack Smith, 10.3 broad for Edelman, 10.5 broad for JSN. Those are unbelievably close numbers. I truly have not seen two prospects come that close to each other ever.
Last year, I used Edelman for a comp last year for Sky Moore. That's who Sky Moore reminded me of a year ago. Mm-hmm. For the first thing you mentioned was a similar thing, like a guy that plays inside, doesn't necessarily have to play outside, wins with footwork, those kinds of things. That's an interesting one. Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison reminds me a little bit of Isaac Bruce, where he's not physically imposing in any way, shape, or form. He's not fast. He's not big. He's not strong. But he's just good. He's a good wide receiver. And particularly later career Isaac Bruce, where he was sort of getting by, even more so on savvy, on just being in the right place at the right time, had this ridiculous run where he would just go, you know what, I'm 30 years old, I'm not even going to take a hit anymore. I'm just going to catch the ball and then drop like a sack of potatoes into this one spot and take the first down. I feel like all the deficiencies that people are sort of hammering Addison for, they're just not going to matter. I feel the way he wins, they're irrelevant.
So, fun fact about that comp, they are the exact same height and the exact same weight coming out.
Really?
Isaac Bruce was 5'11", 173 coming out. Ended up being a second-round pick. Jordan Addison, 5'11", 173.
I knew they were in the same ballpark.
And there's not a lot of 5'11", 173 wide receivers, so I know that. Because I was looking back, who is even in the realm of that size? Yeah. And Isaac Bruce is the only one who, at that size, was an NFL player.
I knew they were in the same ballpark. I didn't realize it was exact. But that to me is the kind of player that Addison is. Yeah. All All right, cornerbacks. I had a couple of corner comps that I thought were pretty good. Trey Tomlinson.
Okay, hit me with them.
Anthony Tresh assures me that Travius Hodges Tomlinson now wants to be known as Trey Tomlinson. And given how much easier it is to say, I'm 100% on board with adopting that now. So Trey Tomlinson, TCU cornerback, reminded me a lot of Antoine Winfield, the original Antoine Winfield, not the safety. But a guy that was a prototypical slot, but actually played outside a lot as well. So Winfield did it in the NFL. I suspect Tomlinson gets kicked inside and just gets made into a slot corner, but could probably survive outside in a similar kind of way. Insanely feisty, like just wants to fight people, like get into a physical confrontation. And he does a lot of that Winfield stuff of like contorting his way around blockers. Winfield was the best I've ever seen at that, to the point where half the stuff that Winfield used to do is now illegal. But Tomlinson does similar kinds of stuff in terms of just somehow getting around guys that are out in space, trying to block him away from those screens and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I like the play style comp. He still is, like, Winfield still has 2 inches on him, still has 20 pounds on him.
Right.
So, like, Trey Tomlinson is tiny. He will be, I believe, whenever he is drafted, he will be the highest drafted player, either corner or safety in the secondary, under 5'8" ever. I think they're like ever being like modern NFL. Probably in 1955, there was probably a 5'6" dude who was drafted, whatever. But I'm talking modern NFL. The only like comps you have for him in that realm, Tim Jennings. In that realm of size, who was 5'8", 185. Nickel Roby-Coleman, 5'7" and a quarter, but he was now obviously drafted when he came out. He was at UDFA. Lamarcus Joyner, 5'8", 180. That's like, if you're looking for guys who actually succeeded in the same size bracket, like pretty much identical height, weight, that's really about it in the last 25 years.
Jennings is a great throwback. I'd forgotten that name entirely. So the other corner that I had
that was my comp for actually him in the draft guide.
Oh, nice. The other corner that I had a comp for was the other sort of high-end slot guy in this draft, Clark Phillips. Reminded me a lot of Chris Carr. And I don't know how many people even remember Chris Carr, old Raiders slot corner, Ravens, I think, as well. Maybe a couple of other places late in his career. But Chris Carr, I think there's a lot of similarities there. That
Cowboys,
kind of
right?
Prototypical. No, that was Brandon Carr, right? He didn't play.
Oh, okay. Wrong Carr. Then I don't remember Chris Carr. You're right.
So like prototypical slot corner back in the day, small, feisty, twitchy. He reminded me a lot of Chris Carr's play. And it turns out it's very difficult to find Chris Carr tape still out in the ether. You type Chris Carr, like highlights or whatever, you need to specify the NFL player, because apparently there's a basketball player named Chris Carr as well. And the only thing you find is him intercepting Ben Roethlisberger for the Raiders one time. But he struck me a lot like Chris Carr. Who else?
Yeah, Clark Phillips is one of the weirder prospects in this class. I'll just to add to that real quick. Because he's small and unathletic, right? Like small and below average athlete for your position it's a scary combo.
Right.
That I do think, like you said, he's probably going to have to be a slot at the next level. And yeah, I think he'll be damn good in that, but that's which taking things off a guy's plate, hard to put them back on. One I really liked in this draft class. I don't have any other good corner ones, but I'm gonna go to linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
I like Jack Campbell, the Iowa linebacker, to Logan Wilson, the Wyoming linebacker. I think both are very steady. Like both have few weaknesses to their game, and you look at their athletic profiles, and it's like there's nothing elite about them, shall we say? Like they're not special athletes, but they aren't deficient in any way, shape, or form. And then that's how I feel about them on the football field. Solid tacklers, solid stack shed dudes, can play between the tackles till the cows come home. You may not be getting Bobby Wagner, but you're getting an above average starter for your football team at Mike linebacker. So I think that still has a good amount of value, and the security and safety is why, Campbell's LB2, top 50 player on the PFF board right now.
Yeah, I like that one. I like Jack Campbell a lot as well, actually. The last one I had was one we brought up yesterday. Joey Porter Jr. immediately reminded me a lot of J.C. Horn, and I think he's actually he's he struck me as more fluid, more dynamic than J.C. Horn was, which, to be fair, was something that I didn't like about J.C. Horn's tape, but that hasn't been a problem at the next level. So I may have just been too low on Horn's ability to do that kind of stuff at the time, but that struck me as that's immediately who he reminded me of. Apparently it also is the same name Steve came up with watching his tape as well. What's your take on that one? I'm curious how you think we did.
Let me see who I comp Porter to. I didn't have a strong feel. I thought Horn was, they both are like, you're watching their tape, both are just pure bullies at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
And that's why it was almost hard to get a feel for J.C. Horn coming out, where it's just like, damn, he does nothing other than kill guys and then it's over.
Right.
You know, like, I don't know how he turns. I don't know how, or like, just like watch his tape. I don't know how he is, how fluid he is, like down the football field. I don't know how he mirrors, because reps are over before they even get a chance to get to that point. So with Joey Porter, I feel similarly about some of his best reps. Like his best reps are just, it's over at the line. I counted Carlton Davis.
Okay.
Who's similarly large, just like wins at the line press corner. But I see Horn as well, yeah.
So you got one more that I really like, actually. Michael Mayer, the tight end. Who did you comp him to?
Jason Witten. This might be my favorite comp of any. And now it's not like a pure – they didn't test out maybe as accurately as Julian Edelman and Jackson Smith-Njigba. But you watch them play, and they run the same way. You know, Jason Witten had the shuffle.
Yeah.
His feet didn't leave the ground when he ran. That's Michael Mayer. Like, he has the same shuffle. He has the same kind of subtle shoulder lean into a linebacker, and then just pushes off and he's gone. And there's like a yard of separation. That's all he needs, because he's going to haul it in. Like, they are very similar in those regards, and just skill set that you're getting at the next level.
I really like that one, actually, because I think it's true where for a long, long time, you watch Jason Witten tape and you're like, how does this keep working time after time after time? Like, there's nothing impressive about this. It's somehow just enough every single play, and then he's going to catch 57 out routes over the course of the season and add in like a smattering of the other occasional play here or there, and that's going to amount to 800 yards every year, and then he's just going to keep going until the end of time and become like one of the greatest tight ends in NFL history. And you're like, how do we get from one place to the other? I don't understand how we got here. That's kind of how I feel about Mayer, where I found myself very underwhelmed by his tape a lot, but it worked. Like, it kept getting results, and you're like, as long as it keeps working, who cares? Right? But you end up, I think that's a great comp. You end up in this kind of Jason Witten world where it's so much less impressive than, a Travis Kelce or a Tony Gonzalez or whoever, like other elite tight end you want to pick out. But when it all stacks up at the end of it, he's in the same ballpark as those guys for production.
Yeah. And that's why I think fit for him is huge. Like, if you want to, like, I think he's awesome if you have two nice starting wide receivers, right? You got two nice starting wide receivers that are vertical threats, he'll be awesome in your offense, in my opinion, because he's so good in the middle of the football field. But if you really want to make him like a focal point, like the way Kelce is used, like the way I think Dalton Kincaid could even be used at the next level, the way, Kyle Pitts, or like, the high end tight ends, if you want him to be a first progression kind of guy, I just don't think that's ever going to be him. But if he's like like I said, if you already have two guys in place, like, that takes your offense to a level that's damn near impossible to stop, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of your best comps. I like that one a lot.